Thank you, Chris. Thank you all for being here this evening. And Gabrielius, thank you so much for joining us.
Great pleasure.
I want to start with a little bit about you before we talk about the world. You grew up in a political household. Your grandfather, for those who don't know, was a leading figure in Lithuanian independence at the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union. When did you decide you wanted to be a politician?
I know when I decided not to be a politician. That came first. Seeing everything, how politics works in a small country where everybody knows everybody else, and it's an extremely transparent, not in a good way, process. So as a teenager, I really rebelled. I said, well, that's not a path for me. Now my kids are saying exactly the same thing, and. Later on, I had this urge or understanding that I'd like to serve my country in some capacity, and I figured that the best way to do it is to join the diplomatic corps. I did that for a while, and I decided I could do more in politics. So then there was a switch. I would say that there was a natural path, but now when I look back, I say I served my country for almost 25 years, both as a diplomat and a politician.
So if you were not, we'll talk about the world in a minute, and just so that people understand the path, we'll chat for maybe 40, 45 minutes, and then we'll open it up for the group. If you had not gone into politics, diplomacy, and then politics, into government service, what would you have been?
I would teach.
Really?
Yeah. If they would take me. Yeah, but
well, you've just made fans in the room, I think. Teach what?
In school, I was fascinated with history, and that fascination has never left me. And if there's a thing that I like telling stories, and so I have 4 kids, and neither of them, well, one still has a chance. 3 of them chose not political, not history studies. So there are 3 of them are in university already. But I'm glad that all 4 of them have history as their hobby. And I might have played a little part in that. So I imagine myself, that I would like to do that, and whenever I have an invitation as a politician, as a now retired politician, to come back to a classroom to talk about, well, either geopolitics or history, or explain, the Baltic background, what does it mean to be a Baltic person with very specific history and geography. As much as I can, I always take the opportunity.
Well, terrific. Well, we may wander into history here, because I have found in my experience that conversations about the Baltics at some point touch the 13 or 1400s. This is
unavoidable.
Yeah, somewhat. So we're at November in a very busy year. The United States is pulling out of global politics. Europe may be stepping up. Ukraine is holding on. Russia is pushing forward. Do you find yourself, as we start November, more or less optimistic about the situation in Europe in general and Ukraine in particular than you were at the start of the year?
Okay, so when it comes to, I have to separate then the answer in 2 parts. So one part is that I've always said that the only thing, paradoxically, that gives me optimism and hope is Ukrainian fight. Whenever I wake up, I turn on any media that I would use that particular morning, and I see that there's a new oil refinery burning. I think, okay, things are moving in the right direction. Ukrainians are building up strength, they are building capacity, they are using the weapons that they develop mostly themselves the right way. They're not being restricted, they're not asking for permission. I don't think that they will apologize as well. So this is where, because Ukrainian fight will be defined by how strong they are in battle. That has been my belief from the first day. And it is, for me, it is a fact of nature that the wars are being fought in the battlefield and they are being decided in the battlefield. And any diplomatic outcome that might or might not come out of it will still come out of the battlefield. Those who believe that these are two parallel tracks that you can somehow diplomat your way out of the military conflict, it's still decided on the relative strength of both parties in the war. So the stronger Ukraine gets, the more optimistic I am, and they've showed some remarkable progress this year. Really, I mean, this is just remarkable, and it gives hope, not just for Ukraine, but I'm using this Ukrainian argument for others as well, and my country including, that this is asymmetry in play. This is where Ukrainians were able to show that it is possible for a country that is it's much smaller than an adversary to create a leverage. And and then there are others who are looking at this. My country, all of the eastern flank, probably Taiwan, and then so many others who are thinking, okay, so we might actually have a chance, right? Because before that, it was much worse. The perception was much worse. Now, the second part is because in your question you combine the two. Europe is where I have unfortunately less optimism. I know that there are good signs, and I have to start with a disclaimer that there are good signs. There are specific countries that are doing really a lot and then moving with much faster pace by adapting to the changes in geopolitics and in the world politics. Clearly, I mean, I don't need to mention countries in East Flank, Poland being probably the shining example. Way before current U.S. administration put out the demands of more funding, they've been there. They've done a lot. My country as well, pushed forward and tried to do the right thing, not because somebody's asking for that, but because we understand the threat they have. Germany as well, made some remarkable decisions, changing constitution, using the opportunity after the election when the new parliament has not yet started working, just to change the constitution in order to allow countries to, to borrow more to fund the required industrial changes and stuff like that. So these are the good examples. But my biggest worry is that we're still, and the way that I'm presenting the answer is that I'm talking about separate countries, and we're a continent. We're a continent of 450 million people that has not yet gained the understanding that if we're separate, we fall. Germany is a small country compared to China. Germany is unfortunately a small country compared to the United States. That means that we are unable to withstand any kind of pressure. We are unable to figure out the real way, how do we withstand the pressures from Russia? And I think that this question has not yet been answered. And as time goes by, it becomes ever more pressing. And so I've advocated, I mean, we've always prouded that, that Europe is being built through crisis. With every new crisis, we become stronger as a union, as a collective. And we're in the fourth year of the crisis. And unfortunately, I don't see us getting that much more stronger. And that means that the question of European future is unfortunately not yet answered.
So I want to go then and uncouple the two parts of my question and your answer, and talk a little bit about Ukraine for a while, and then really focus on Europe, both as it relates to Ukraine and just as it relates to Europe. But first, Ukraine. There are voices in the United States, elsewhere, certainly in Russia, every time there's a conversation about the root causes of the conflict, that point the arrow back to NATO. Those voices were quieter for a while in the United States. They're getting louder again. I want to give you an opportunity as a representative and former diplomat in a country on the front line, a member of NATO, benefited from NATO expansion, to reply to those who would say NATO deserves at least part of the blame for the conflict in Ukraine because it should have known better than to expand as far as it did and as quickly as it did up to the borders of Russia. That's an argument that's out there. And since you were right in the middle of it, how do you answer people when they come back with that?
So first of all, there's a great book that's really delving deep into this argument. It's by Professor Serati. It's called Not One Inch. Worthwhile reading. I don't entirely agree with the arguments there, and I would like to explain why. Not the arguments, but the conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
The conclusion, at least the way that I read it, is that having a gray zone or buffer zone areas between the West and Russia creates more stability. My argument is the opposite, that the gray zone invites aggression, especially in the times of political change, geopolitical change, because the motivation for aggression comes from within. First and foremost, every foreign policy is driven by internal policy. So Russia's decision to attack, we also need to look into the reasons within. It's a falling economy. It's a need to revitalize a mandate for a dictator, the way that he understands that, right? So in order to explain to people that he's still doing the right thing. So it comes from within, and then we see the expression. And the expression is into the so-called gray areas. So the reason why I'm coming from a free country is that we're not in a gray zone. The reason why Ukraine is under attack today because it was left in a gray zone. And therefore I push back on the argument that it's somehow NATO's fault. It's basically the opposite. NATO was too slow, to live up to its promise. We needed to figure out 2008, and when the promise was given, it had to be, we were supposed to hold up to it and deliver. We didn't, and there we have it. We have basically three wars, three acts of aggression separately after the 2008. First in Georgia, twice in Ukraine. If my country was left in a gray zone, I don't think that I would be sitting here in the capacity that I am currently able to do that. So that's the argument number one. The second argument is a bit wider. There is a tendency, and maybe there are experts even in this hall who would talk about this even better. But there's a tendency of so-called, at least I figured a name for it, for the authoritarian victimhood. Mm. When you read Stalin's arguments for signing a non-aggression treaty with Hitler in 1938, he declared that he was a victim because he was afraid that the West, that were quote unquote courting Nazi Germany, they would have definitely attacked him, and therefore there was nothing for him else to do than just to sign an agreement with Germany and invade Poland, my country, and occupy a big chunk of Eastern Europe. And the funny part is that probably you could even go beyond that. I mean, in the modern sense, democracy versus autocracy, autocracies have this argument, and we buy into it. Now, Putin's Russia is somehow always humiliated, always under threat, but it's the only one that is actually attacking and killing other people. I mean, I can even go further. Listen to how Xi Jinping is basing his argument. 100 years of humiliation again, and we hear the same argument is somehow those poor autocrats are always under threat, always under pressure, always humiliated, always underappreciated. But while when you look, and I will go back to the same book of Not One Inch, it reflects beautifully all the attempts that have been made by the West over the heads of the Balts, over the heads of Poles, and Czechs and Slovaks and Hungarians to seek an arrangement that would appease or calm down Russian, any sort of ambition. So, so I think we need to start pushing back, well, disseminating the argument. You're not a victim here. Actually, you're the first offender. You attacked. No matter the reason, you challenged the local rules of order. And the reason that I started with Stalin, because he's the grandfather of idea, at least in my mind. And pointing finger there, and then we should go all the domino line until today and say, well, we're not accepting that argument. This is not true, and we won't buy it.
It's the capacity to simultaneously hold an inferiority complex and a superiority complex.
Yeah,
at the same time, yeah. So you said in January and since that Putin will continue to wage war, whether in Ukraine, Lithuania, or in Germany. In that case, I want to talk a little bit about how you see the war in Ukraine ending. And let me ask it through this. You produced a podcast for a couple of months that I tuned into a little bit, and you titled it Escalation. And so I was wondering, did you mean that as a description or as a prescription?
Prescription.
Prescription.
Yeah.
That we needed to escalate.
Yeah.
So with that, then, how do you see the war ending?
I might be a bad prophet, so I'll take a risk.
I mean, it's a prophet in their own countries.
Yeah. So yeah, it's good that I'm out, right?
Yeah, there you're safe.
Yeah. So I don't. First of all, I don't see a way that Putin would agree to a ceasefire.
Mhm.
It might look like one, but in general, I don't think that he would be able to do that. And there are political reasons. Now he went so far in his own country that backing down for him, they're paying enormous price for this endeavor, and it has to end up with success, because he knows that at the end, it's he either wins or loses as a person. There's a practical side as well. And the practical side is that, just imagine, so the front in Ukraine, and we rarely talk about this, the front in Ukraine is 2,000 kilometers. 2,000 kilometers is like from my capital, from Vilnius to Amsterdam. So if we were to hold, if Europe were to hold as much front, so imagine the territory, the tiny Lithuania, Poland, chunk of Germany, so basically, all the eastern and part of Western Europe. That is how much is being held now by Ukrainians. Now imagine a ceasefire. We would always say, right, we don't trust Putin, right? We don't trust that he will keep this promise, to keep a ceasefire. So imagine that on the other side is a person who is 100 times more paranoid. So that means he would never trust Ukrainians agreeing to a ceasefire. So that means that for him now, he maintains basically, 800,000 million people's force to just hold the line, where sporadic breakthroughs are happening. So he would need to maintain that. Otherwise, he would be afraid that Ukrainians will, just counterattack one day and take back, whatever land they can. So keeping that army, it's very expensive, and it is counterproductive. I mean, it just keeps the country in frozen. Add to that the war economy. Imagine a factory that is producing, has been producing some, Nivas, Ladas, or some other old Russian car, which is not very good, and now it's producing tanks. And now you have to switch back into the production of the equipment that basically nobody really needs. So, so the whole Russian machine is, rusty, rotten. It's built on now is standing on one leg, that is this war. And So yeah, so that's the point. So that's my thinking, that it will have to be solved
On the battlefield.
on a battlefield.
So where then do we escalate?
The thing is, so first of all, we've allowed Ukrainians to escalate.
Yeah.
And this
Grudgingly, but
sorry?
grudgingly, but
And this has changed. This has changed, right? So if there is a change between the previous administration, the current administration, vis-a-vis Ukraine, is that there are no, at least seemingly, right? So I'm not privy to the classified information, but from what we know, Ukrainians are not reprimanded when they attack deep within Russia. Even on the contrary, it looks like Washington would like to be on the Ukrainian side, right? So there was an interesting, message that, oh, we gave the intelligence. Maybe again, unknowingly asked. I mean, I don't think that other founders move that much, but I mean, what do I know, right?
so we love to be on that side of it.
It's good. It's a good thing, right? As long as you give the intelligence, we're ready to take it. I'm sure the Ukrainians as well. So please continue doing that. So that is a change, right? So that there are bad changes, which is, US is no longer providing equipment. It's just selling equipment to Ukrainians, and it's 60 times less. Okay, maybe a bit less, but I mean, so last year was 60 billion. This year is 1.5 billion in sales to Europe that should be provided to Ukraine. So that's a huge difference. Europeans were able to pick up the slack, and this year the total amount of support provided to Ukraine is still the same. Like last year, so massively Europeans have been paying up. But that means that we're no longer being able to give American equipment that in some cases is extremely needed. So out of big chunk of last year's money, big part of it was, uniquely US produced equipment that is needed in Ukraine.
But is that level of spending by Europe sustainable? I mean, my understanding, some of that is coming out of, funds left over from COVID, right? And so put escalation aside, I mean, even sustainability of the current level of funding from.
That's a very good question. Again, one of the criticisms that I voiced out to Europe is that it's a simple example, but I think it's pretty telling, right? So we had COVID crisis, right? It's the first time that Europe borrowed as a unit, as a union. We called it a temporary Hamiltonian movement, for those better versed in American history than I am. Temporary because kind of we thought that, okay, so maybe Europe is moving into, this more federalized unit that will be able to fund its needs, as a unit. We borrowed 750 billion euros, which is,
Real money.
Yeah, real money. The fund was created. A lot of new infrastructure was produced. I'm hearing that Italy has wonderful sports facilities out of that fund. I mean, whatever. We built, windmill parks, and so whoever does, each does what it thinks that it needs to. Now we're in the 4th year of war against Ukraine. No new fund has been created. As you say, the only fund, the defense fund, it is a leftover from COVID fund that is now a defense fund, 150 billion. No new fund, no, except for Germany, $500 billion fund. Nothing has been happening on the European scale, which would allow us to sustain. There is an excellent idea. Okay, so if we're in a wall because of political reasons, okay, fine. Russian frozen assets. 190 billion euros frozen in Belgian accounts that we would be able to use. So first it was that we cannot confiscate it because it's against international law. So people came up with a brilliant idea to leverage it, to borrow against the frozen assets, and borrow, you give to Ukrainians, and make it that the repayment is part of a settlement that Russians would have to repay themselves. I mean, this, it's beautiful, and the money is there. The banks are happy. The Russians will pay out one day, right? And it's been what, 2 years, 3 years that we've been discussing this, and still no get ahead. So that might change. I mean, I know that people are thinking about this, and they're but 4th year and no plan, just attempts to fix it. I mean, this is what makes me work.
So this is a deficit really of political will
and understanding, right? So I mean, when you had COVID, there was no question about political will.
Yeah.
There was a mandate by people who were either dying in hospitals, stuck at home, losing their job. So it's not like a politician comes over to the parliament, well, I cannot figure this out. Should I vote for this law or not? It's imperative. You voted now and unanimously, and it happened here in the US, it happened in Europe, you just get the money rolling because that's what you do in the case of crisis. And now we come over and we say, well, I'm not sure whether that's a crisis. So it's not political will, it's the understanding of the threat at hand that might be, even the European Union might not survive this threat.
Well, and so that gets us to Europe, right? So we're in Lithuania, they understand the threat. It's there, it's right across the board. And as you move to Hungary, a very different view of the threat. What threat, right? And then as you go further west, into the Iberian Peninsula, let's say, well, the front line's a long way away. There are a lot of other priorities so you have this medley of interests, and a set of political institutions that are based on unanimity. So how do you break that logjam if that's the only way to continue to strengthen and sustain Ukraine on the battlefield?
Well, I mean, I don't have easy answers. Right? I wish
you're out of office now. You're supposed to have the easy answers.
Yes, I'm objectively saying that the answer that I have, I'm not easy.
Okay, fine.
I mean, I don't see a way out of federalization. Basically, we have to bite the pill and get it over with. There's no other way around it, because we are tested, we are ineffective, and it's just not one test. It's all over the place, right? So it's United States, with change of its attitude, new trade policies, rewriting the transatlantic agenda. It's China, which now, I mean, we are completely out of the game, right? So Chinese leader made a deal with United States president and informed the public, well, that Europe is also part of the deal. We were so far out of that room that it's, the distance is horrifying. So, we're definitely not in the room where it happens, where, we're somewhere in the different building.
Got a real Hamiltonian focus, don't you?
Yeah. It's good to be among the people who, that's a good quote, yeah.
So federalization, by federalization, you mean a strengthening of what do you mean by federalization?
So being able to make decisions, federation in effect means that, so that you devote a bigger part of sovereignty towards the center.
Right. That was Hamiltonian federalization for sure.
Yeah, I mean, but it's what it is, right? So finances, but then finances for what? So you have to reconfigure. One of the things that probably would be the first steps is to getting around the veto. So Europe, until it figures it out, is basically unable to make a decision as a union if we're trying to get 27 on board on every single decision that there is. And you mentioned, right? So you mentioned countries that are, so in many cases, for example, Hungary, and I'm glad that I'm out of office so I can say this, it's more like, it doesn't have a different interest at this level. It has interests, it has Russian interests at heart, right? So there's a Russian agent within European Union and NATO more than anything else. European South do have different interests. Geography plays a very strong part in this, right? So there is no mandate for the people, to get tough on Russia. You know, I've seen the map, and it was like for Portugal to bring its military force to the eastern flank, it's 41 hours of driving. Right, so for us, where in my capital, people are astonished how close we are to Belarusian border.
Mhm.
You sit in a taxi, 25 minutes, you're at the border. This is in Belarus. They're 41 hours. So for people to to mandate a politician that, oh look, something is happening out there, it's a tough job, and it's understandable, right? So we can do more, for this cohesion. But public diplomacy, public outreach can only do so far, so much.
So I have one more question about Europe, and then I have one question about the United States, and then we're going to go to the audience. On getting around veto, right? There's kind of two broad ways to do it. One is, federal type institution in which there's like a European army and so forth, and a majority or a supermajority, but not unanimity, is required to deploy it. The other is the coalition of willing, right? So there's a coalition of states that are working together to support Ukraine. There might be a different coalition that's working on trade policy. Is one of those sort of more viable than the other?
Well, I would wish that we would figure out a way around veto as a union that would secure union for the future. Meaning that we would get stronger, being able to make decisions for everyone, for Spain, for Portugal, for Finland and Lithuania.
Because the bespoke coalition sort of erode the unity.
Exactly, that is my point. And if we don't get around this, and unfortunately we're already seeing this, fractures within the union, or tiny mini European unions being formed. Just take Nordic and Baltic cooperation, NB8 or NB6 within European Union. We're already much closer than anything else. At least in my time, I don't know. I'm pretty sure that it's the same thing now. Almost weekly conversations among the ministers. So much coordination. Where you basically align yourself so that when we go to NATO summit or meeting, we get to go to European meeting, we speak in one voice. So what you're seeing is already a beginning of of some sort of a unification within another center, and the anchor is very clear. It's the Baltic Sea.
Mm-hmm.
This is the center of the biggest geopolitical risk. Things are happening around. So we take the high north that begins in Norway and Finland. We go around. So still Russia and the West will clash here if the deterrence would completely fail. So you see those countries scooching over and trying to figure out, so what happens if things go really bad? And by bad, I mean not just Putin escalating, but alliances fracturing, right? If we call our allies, and unfortunately it takes a lot for them to come over. So what do? So now you see, Germany was also a Baltic Sea country. We need to remember that. Sending a brigade to Lithuania, and hopefully by 2027. For the first time since the Second World War, Germany will be deploying permanently outside their country. For them, it's a mental shift. For friends in the United States, it's like that has been always for Germany. No, for almost no European power that has been the case. Maybe France, absolutely. But so that's a new development. And then you see Swedish-Finnish cooperation, new heights, something that has not been seen in the past. Poland, stretching its muscles. So kind of, I would believe that if we don't solve the issues in European Union, where vetoes persist, where we don't have a cohesive interest, and NATO is with at least a tiny bit of question mark about its future, we would see these coalitions of like-minded. And if I may, just last example. So, for example, we have to be honest. when there was a drone operation, a drone attack against Poland, several weeks ago, with 20 drones flying into Poland, people would say, well, that was, NATO took the planes down. Well, NATO did not make a decision to take the planes down. Poland did. And coalition of the willing joined in. At least to my knowledge, Netherlands, Italy, Sweden joined in. They had resources to help Poland. While NATO made a decision, so there was an Article 4 request, for consultations. There was a consultation happen, and the outcome of consultations was, moral support to Poland, and investigation that, as far as I know, is still ongoing, whether the drone incursion was that the Russians meant it. Intentional, yes, that was the word, yeah. That was intentional. So we are still figuring it out as an alliance.
I wasn't going to ask this, but I'm curious about your opinion on it, just kind of quickly. The drone incursions are clearly, nothing's clear, but clear as these things can be, testing the alliance, right? How quickly will it respond? Where is the point at which certain members of the alliance will say, no, we're not going to engage for this country or for that, or for drones? Drones are kind of an easy case because you shoot down a drone, you haven't killed anyone. But there's also MiGs flying in, right? Do you think there's a bright line between shooting down drones and shooting down MiGs?
There is a line. There is a line, but there is also a line of measures that could be taken.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think we sometimes think in extremes because it's easier than for politicians to say, well, I cannot do that. I mean, I'm unable to, to shoot a rocket at Moscow. Well, nobody's asking at this, right? So we have a lot of instruments that could go beyond the line. So non-kinetic. And this is what I meant, I thought that I might answer this question when you asked about the podcast escalation. So we have means to escalate, but not crossing the line, which would, freak out the Russians, and then would retaliate with nuclear weapons, So we have cyber, we have, lots of other things that we can do. Now, and then, I've read somewhere that, for example, so if Russian MiG flies in, and there's a air defense system that locks in, that's a message. Right? So at this stage, we're locking in.
And at that point, we're testing them.
Yeah, we're testing them, right? So you fly in, we lock in. We are not engaging you, right, in your territory. We're not flying over St. Petersburg. We're not doing anything to you. We're defending our territory, which is a completely fair thing to do, right? So you show that we have means. But if we present it as a, 1 or 0 case, that, well, they fly in, and then the only thing that we can do is, is a kill a Russian soldier, a pilot, whatever, and that would escalate the war, and then, clearly, then we are engaged. Well, I don't buy that argument. I believe that it's, it's a lazy argument, and again, one of those that we need to push back on. And well, there are ways how to do that. I've always argued that, well, if nothing else, Ukrainians are asking us to let them escalate for us. Like, we're ready. Like, just give us Tomahawk and we'll show you how to do it.
My last question before turning to the audience, it turns back to the United States a bit. You had the good fortune, I guess, for your foreign ministership to overlap pretty tightly the Biden administration here in the United States, and you were no longer foreign minister when Trump returned to office. If you had been, I wonder how you would have thought about dealing with this second American administration, given the array of changes it has unleashed in American foreign policy, globally, tariffs, economically, Europe, Ukraine?
Well, that's a very good question, because the thing is that I have a short story to tell in this regard. So it was end of 2023, and our I think it was our embassy in Washington for the first time. They reported back that out of the basically all evidence that they have, all the conversations with pollsters and people, and anywhere that they basically so consolidated information tells them that there's a very, very great chance that Donald Trump is returning as a president. So that was a year before the election. And then we started the process in the ministry, basically to figuring out. I think I gave a task for best minds in the ministry, saying, imagine if, because what we learned from the first term is that in many cases, what he says he's going to act upon it. Don't read between the lines. Don't imagine that we somehow will get around this. Imagine that this is what is coming. If he says he's going to leave NATO, he might leave NATO. So imagine the worst case scenario and plan for that. And we did some preparation. So we worked diligently for almost up until our election to prepare the institutions, at least as a mind exercise. And what is very unfortunate that we've been very much right on many things. Now, so okay, worst scenarios have not happened, but I mean, the clarity about American support to Europe is now more of an ambiguity, which is still better than clarity on the other side, right? But it's not what it used to be, and it might be reassuring to Putin it might give a hint to Putin that things are changing. It might be interesting to test that, to what extent. But there is one lesson that I've learned, and hopefully I will. I'm writing down an op-ed about this, so I hope that it will make to light. That there is a lesson in Ukraine, from Ukraine. That, and it's not just Trump. I would believe that again, as an outsider, I think that United States and Americans do like winners. And President Trump, even more so. And I remember very well the Oval Office thing in February. You have no cards, right? Several months later, as we spoke, suddenly President Trump decides that, well, maybe Zelensky had some cards. Maybe it's too early to ditch him, and maybe it was a bit too soon to stand together in Alaska with Putin, who actually does not have such a good heart as he was telling in private conversations, I'm sure. And there's a lesson in this, that one is that the United States position is changing. It will be changing, and it has not started to change with Trump. It has started to change. It was changing through Biden. It was changing with Obama. We have to accept it. We might argue privately or intellectually, academically, whatever. I think it will not be in the best of interest, but most likely it is just happening. It's a fact. That means that we will have to take greater burden on ourselves. That there will be ambiguity, and we might be tested, and it will be most likely, at least at the beginning, to take that test upon ourselves, and we will have to be the first, to bear the cost of it. But the hope is that the things might turn around, as they have in the First World War, as they had in the Second World War, and as we're now seeing with Ukraine, where if you show that you have tenacity, if you have strength and will to fight, and show yourself as a winner, you might actually garner support here as well.
That's a hopeful note, and I am going to use that to pivot to the audience. Floor is open. Yes. Yeah.
No.
No, we have a mic coming up.
Thank you so much for your talk. I'm Camilo from David Center here. I have two brief questions. The first one, I'd like to dive deeper in Steve's question about how sensitive Western European countries are to the full invasion war against Ukraine. But at the political level, many Western European countries are facing difficult problems inside their respective political scenarios. For example, both France and Germany are facing political problems with political oppositions and the rise of far right and far left. In France, for example, both parties are ready to not firmly condemn Russian full-scale invasion. In Germany, the AfD is also not so firmly condemning the invasion. So, as this scenario develops further, do you think that opposition to Russia is at risk at the EU level? And do you think there is Russian intelligence hand in these political problems?
Camille, I'm just going to hold you to one, and then on where we go, we might loop back around to you. Okay. Okay.
Well, the answer actually quite easy. Is that yes, it is at risk, and I would not be able to exclude that Russian hand is somehow also in this. There have been announcements, public announcements about this or that politician that has been apprehended by the authorities, and because of the in ties with Russian intelligence. We know about the money that has been flowing from Russian banks towards, for example, the French opposition, and or radical parties. Let's put it that way. And so I wouldn't exclude that there is a plan behind this. So just the facts that we have are as I mentioned. So as I said before, the thing is that there are no easy solutions anymore. And if politicians still think that we might somehow get around this, well, we won't. It won't get better. We will have to solve this. And I hope that we as Europeans will be able to solve it as a union, because otherwise we will solve it as separate countries. Not for better, for worse.
Yes. No, yeah.
Mr. Landsbergis, thank you very much. And as a Ukrainian here, let me express my deep gratitude for his steadfast support of my country. And for what your country is doing disproportionately to support Ukraine. Thank you very much. So you spoke about Russia as a sort of this shaky rotten system. It's hard to disagree, right? Standing on this war footing. But it's also instructive not to underestimate your opponent, right? What, in your view, are some of the Russian strengths that we should be aware of and should be prepared to counter? And what are some of the, most significant points of its vulnerability?
You're absolutely right. I always argue exactly the same point, because the opinion in the West is sometimes divided. Some people say, well, there's nothing to it. It's just a fuel station, run by mafia, and basically that's it. Yeah, but it still has nuclear weapons, right? So we cannot overlook. Can it attack a NATO country? It can, because they would calculate that the answer will just not come, that the Article 5 would not work. That would be their expectation. They can do a lot of damage to a country like mine, to a country like Poland, and they can change the landscape of Europe if they kind of set their mind to it. Now, the point is that, and my main argument, that a country of 40 million, Ukraine, was able to stop Russia. So when somebody in Europe says, well, we are unable, if Americans don't support us, then that's it. Well, guys, this is just not the way that it works. I understand that we cannot match Russia with nuclear weapons. right now as Europe, right? We don't have the procedures, we don't have the command centers, nothing. But would we be able to do the same thing like Ukraine did? Hell yeah, absolutely. And that combined, just take Nordics and Baltics, take Germany, well, take, big part of European Union. If we would muster the same power that Ukraine has, and the ability and the political will to strike, that would, in my mind, start working as a deterrent. Russia does not want to lose every single node of its economic power in the country, and it could. Maybe without triggering the nuclear war, because it's just drones. But every oil power plant, every port, everything that produces some economic worth in the country might be taken out, and Europe can't do that. So this is where so they're weak, structurally weak, only if we challenge that, like Ukraine did. If we don't, well, then it's an open door policy, and they can come in and take whatever.
I'm Julia Denka from Kharkiv Karazi National University, and I'm visiting fellow here at Curie. Thank you so much for your constant support to Ukraine and to all Lithuanian people, because it's very significant for us. Recently, ex-chancellor of Germany, Frau Merkel, accused in a way Baltics and Poland that they prevented her and probably Macron from the direct negotiations with Putin before 2022. Could you elaborate a little bit more about this? But actually, we have drastic changes now in Germany, right? So we have MERS, but we have in Ukraine no towers yet. So my question is, how much will do they have in this coalition of willing? And probably going further, would they at least include Ukraine to the agenda of the EU enlargement, not only on security issues, but how should we be kind of rely on the promises of this European perspective for Ukraine?
Well, so several questions. So one is about Merkel. Honestly, I was surprised. I was really surprised when I read that. So her statement was not as strong, but I mean it's still leaning into the way that there was a proposal that was in some way blocked by by Baltic and Polish representatives. The only thing that I can feel proud, right? So we have so much power to block these sort of things. They rarely manifest. Because whenever Germany, especially if Germany with France want anything in Europe done, I don't think that the Lithuanian representative would be able to stand in the way. So just kind of, I know that we're all equal, but there are objective differences. So I was surprised because if they would have made their mind, if they were bent on it, it would have been done. I mean, the way that, Minsk scenarios or Normandy scenarios worked after 2014, nobody asked Lithuanian opinion, honestly. We had it, we weren't happy, we would not have just, approved it or supported it. It just happened, right? So I'm a bit surprised. Now, coalition of the willing. I criticize them a lot because, it's a bit embarrassing, when, you announce it with a huge fanfare and then you just, the only thing that you come out of it is nice picture. And so coalition of photos, whatever. I'm really upset, honestly, and I have to explain this. I'm really upset about the peace plan, so-called European peace plan that has born out of the coalition of the willing. I know that Ukrainians are participating in this, but basically, I've challenged the whole notion of agreeing to a ceasefire as a beginning of negotiations. And I know that it's a conventional now logic, like, and people would argue with me, like, Ukrainians are agreeing to this, Europeans are agreeing to this, President Trump is agreeing to this, so you are the only one basically saying that you don't like this. But I argued that I don't see a big difference between, Sudetenland and giving, Donbass to Putin now. It's being done for exactly the same reasons. The only reason, yes. So that was de jure, right? So countries agreed that now part of Czechoslovakia will be part of Germany. Now we won't agree, right? So it will be de facto. So I called it de facto Sudetenland. But it's there and it's coming out of Europe. So it's admittance of our weakness. So I'm a bit upset about this. And now, again, ending on an optimistic note. So just today, there was a report released about the progress towards EU membership, and I'm really glad that Ukraine got really good grades. I was worried that the countries, it's not final. I mean, but at least the Commission did their work, and they said that Ukraine is continuing on the path of reform, and that is so. First of all, kudos to Ukraine. And second, that means there is enough political will in your European Commission to say what needs to be said. The corruption side was noted that it's lacking, so also needs to be noted.
Thank you for a very interesting conversation. My name is Gabrielius. I'm American-born Lithuanian. Actually served as an interpreter for your grandfather. That sense that you are, the idea of these mini alliances is in disfavor. I guess the idealistic preference would be a federation of the European Union, or at least NATO countries. When I consider the situation of Lithuania and the Russian threat against it, it seems like a mini alliance can serve a great deal. For example, a mini alliance of just Poland, the three Baltics, Finland, and Sweden would probably at least hold off any Russian. And if you add to that one more of either Germany, Britain, or France, the balance goes the other way.
Yeah, you're right. I'm just saying that if I would now publicly, because I understand that this event will be public in a way, if I would to say that these mini alliances is the way, that means that I'm throwing everything else under the bus. I don't want to do that, right? I'm not the person to do that. It might happen. I don't wish it to happen. There are great things that we've done as NATO. We're still doing them. There are amazing things that we've done as European Union. My country. Please go ahead and visit. Present. It's a beautiful country, and also part of that we are part of the European Union. That allowed us to rebuild, restructure, and then become the country that we are today. I would very much like the alliance and the union becoming stronger and continue. But as I say, well, since we have to talk about this, at least think in our independent positions about the plan B. So you're absolutely right. Just Nordics and Baltics have an economy of a G10 country. So we as a region, we're among the 10 most powerful economies in the world. Nowhere near with the people size, right? So Lithuania is 2.8 million. Estonia is just above 1 million, right? And the biggest country probably is Sweden with, I don't remember, 13 million. So imagine, and then the combination is extremely powerful, and it can do a lot of things. So at Poland, 40 million, which on its own is a G20 country now, starting this year. So there's a lot that this alliance could do. And one of the arguments that we came up with when we were preparing this report in the ministry while waiting for the election results in the United States was that just in case, strengthen NATO as a plan A, do everything that NATO provides, but keep an eye on these alliances. Strengthen our relationship with Poland. Make sure that the Baltic unity works. Make sure that that we are with Nordics and Baltics together in this. Have training together. Have our I've said I've told Swedes that, for example, island of Gotland, which is essential in Baltic Sea, right? So one of the first targets, for Russian aggression, if they would try to, to change the situation in Baltic Sea, I say, I would imagine Lithuanian flag there together with Swedish, us defending a Swedish island, if you would ask for, that from us. So this deeper, way deeper integration of our regions is crucial. But I still hope that we're not, kind of letting go of the alliances of 75 years old.
I feel like I've been neglecting this side. Yes, over here.
Mr. Landsbergis, thank you for speaking with us today. You've drawn some distinction between states like Germany and Lithuania and perennial disruptors like Hungary and Spain. But it seems like at the domestic level, with the defeats of Szymeczka in Slovakia and Fiala in Czechia and Trzaskowski in Poland, that the transatlanticist pro-Ukraine approach is becoming increasingly domestically unpopular. As a former political leader, what strategy would you suggest in Europe to counter this?
Well, I'm trying to figure out the angle. The only angle is that it's not necessarily that the transatlanticist is, spirit is losing. So Poland is transatlanticist through and through. So either Nawrocki or Trzaskowski, both are, extremely pro-NATO, pro-United States. And so there is no change there. Probably similar things would be said about Czechia as well. Well, maybe not as strong, but so that means that if alliance survives, at least those countries that elect candidates further from the center are not necessarily against the alliance itself. I hope that it is possible to exclude Hungary and Slovakia still as an outliers. I hope being and Hungary in this as a specific element, which a country that has really become an agent for autocratic interests within Europe. We're awaiting election in Hungary. That will be a very interesting and extremely important event in European Union contemporary politics and history. So we'll see how that goes, and who knows? Maybe it's possible to win that back. I've argued that an increased pressure from European Commission towards the country that are sliding back would be a way how to at least slow some certain processes down. Especially if we're talking about the countries that joined more recently, right? So we're talking about the countries that created European Union. So there's an Article 7 in European Union Treaty in which, if implemented, it's very difficult to implement, that allows a removal of veto right, basically a voting right from a country. That has to, basically everybody else has to vote for it. Right? So Slovakia has to vote against Hungary, right? So that's why I say it's a very difficult process to do. But even starting on that path builds up pressure that we are not going to let that go. Europe is a liberal democratic process, whether we like the name or we don't. It was conceptually that. And if we start to break it, then we break the basis of it. And Hungarians are doing exactly that. breaking the European Union and then turning into something entirely different. So that's why I always argue if we want to maintain the liberal democracy, then we need to fight back. That's by just hoping it will survive on its own, just won't happen.
So we have time really just for one or two more questions. The gentleman right there here.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I'm French.
Oh, well, then never mind. Sorry, I couldn't say.
Now I'm thinking whether I offended you.
And I was very encouraged by the article this morning in the Guardian about enlargement. And the article really said that if we want to accept the other countries by 2030, which is just 4 years down the road, including Ukraine, we may suddenly be 35 instead of 27. And if that happens, apparently at the European Commission, the article mentioned that we need to change the veto structure and we have to get into the majority so that the new countries will have to accept the rules that will be implemented with the majority and no longer with the possibility of a veto. Are you not encouraged by that development that we may indeed find a way to get rid of that veto?
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest changes that happened in European Union recently, they happened through enlargement. The Lisbon Treaty has been the effect of the latest enlargement and, going backwards, that is how you adapt. So there are a lot of things that need now to be fixed. And not just in the way that institutions are run, right? Not just the way the veto is organized, but now we have a commissioner for every single country. There has been always a question whether we need this sort of system. Even is it effective? So we could look at that. There is a Draghi report talking about the way to fix European economy, innovation, and that sort of thing, right? So we need to look at that. There are reports by Finnish president, the previous Finnish president, about the European defense. Again, as a very important pillar to look at that. So suggesting to create a European intelligence agency and many other things. So I think that it's a very ripe time to look into how Europe tackles the modern day threats and challenges and possibilities as well. And to couple that with enlargement, that isn't always the way that we did things. And I'm sure that it could be way forward. But for that, we need a very clear leadership. We need a Northern Star that that would say that, okay, this is where we're going. Like it was with our enlargement when Europe enlarged onto the Baltics. Everybody knew that this is the case. Everybody knew that this is happening. There was no big opposition to that. We've been working day and night in order to be ready for that. Europe was working day and night. And it was almost every day you could measure, how far did we go? Well, now it's a bit different, right? So it doesn't feel as serious. It doesn't feel as if we clearly know where we are going. So the possibility is there. I fully agree with you. And the report is very encouraging. I wish that we would have leaders now who would say, this is it, this is happening. We stake our political future on this, and we will make sure that this happens and push with all the force, and there will be a lot of help with that.
We are just about at time. And so I'm going to wrap us up with one last question for you. As a frustrated but maybe future teacher, if there's one book that you would like everyone here to read that would make them more enlightened, either about what we've been talking about this evening or in general, what's the book that you're urging people to read.
Well, from this year, I can suggest that has been very enlightening to me and a very good read. I would suggest Tim Bowery, Appeasing Hitler. Horrible book. Horrible. Extremely well written, but horrible. Because you read it and you see the names of today's politicians instead of the politicians of the 1930s, 1940s. Horrible. So sad. Anyway, but very enlightening.
Well, to know history is to avoid repeating it. And on that, thank you so much for joining us.